Now, we can already place the other pedal. It's just not going to be controlled by an AI yet. So let's go here into the constructor of the chord class. And let's add another field called right pedal. It's also going to be an instance of pedal, of course. And for the X position, we're going to pass the canvas width minus the width of a pedal minus 12. And for the Y position, it's going to be canvas height divided by 2 minus, well, same thing as here. So I'm just going to copy this so that it's in the center. Well, and actually we can copy all of this, but we have to adjust the player index, which is going to be player 2, of course, but the other values will be the same. And we also need to render that pedal, of course. So let's go into the draw method here, and after rendering the left pedal, we're going to render the right pedal. And of course, we could basically put all of the renderable objects into like a collection and then iterate over that collection and call the draw method for each object in that collection. But since we're really just talking about 4 different objects here, 2 pedals, and the scoreboard and the ball, we don't have to go overboard and start overcomplicating things. So now let's also go here and add a property named right pedal that returns the right pedal, right pedal field. There we go. And this should do the trick. Save, run, start game, and there we have it. All right. Let me save again, which will refresh the website. And okay, so now that that is taken care of, I guess we can already look at user input and controlling the pedal. So let's create a new class for that. Right above the pedal class. Let's call it player pedal controller. There's going to be 2 implementations of a pedal controller. And remember that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. So we could, in other languages that are strongly typed, we could define an interface, for example, called pedal controller. And in that interface, we could have methods like well, to generalize the behavior of an object that controls a pedal. But since JavaScript is dynamically typed or duck typed, we don't need to do that, because if an object has a draw method, we can call it. So it basically, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, as far as JavaScript is concerned, it's a duck. So, or in this case, a pedal controller. So we don't need to define a public interface for different implementations of a pedal controller. We're just going to basically use the same signature, and then that'll be it. Long story short, let's go ahead and create this class. In the constructor, we're going to need to pass the pedal that this pedal controller is supposed to control. We're going to initialize a private field named pedal. Then, let's see. Yeah. Well, we need to subscribe to an event which is raised whenever a key is pressed. The document object here, it has an event called key down, which is raised whenever any key is pressed. And we need to subscribe to that event, meaning we have to attach a callback function to that event so that whenever that event is raised, the key down event, our callback function is called and we can react to the key press. So let's go ahead and do that. First of all, I'm going to declare a variable called that to store this object reference. Then I'm going to say document add event listener. And the name of the event is key down. And this is just stuff that you need to look up in the JavaScript official documentation. But there we will find that there is an event named key down. And we're going to pass a function to it, a callback function, which will then be called. That's fine. And now the parameter, the event arguments here that are passed to the function, with that we can find out which key was pressed. So if the key is arrow up, or if the key is W, we want to move up. Otherwise, if the key is arrow down or S, then we want to move down. And these string literals, these names for the keys, they may be slightly different in other browsers. I think I tested this in Firefox as well, and this should work as well. Not sure about Edge and other browsers. If for some reason these don't work for you, then try to look up the documentation of the browser that you use and find out what the actual key name is there. But I think this should work in most browsers. All right, so let's actually not directly move the paddle, but instead we're going to go ahead here, and up here in the constructor we're going to set a field is up key pressed, and initialize it with false, and same with is down key pressed, initialize it with false. And now here say that is up key pressed equals true, because arrow up or W is pressed. And here that is down key pressed equals true, because the down key is pressed here. And we can then check in our update method that we're going to create. Well, if one of these fields is set to true, and if so, then we're going to move the paddle. Let's maybe create a property here, which only has a getter, and it's named velocity y, the velocity on the vertical axis. I'm going to initialize, declare and initialize a local variable here with 0, and then I check if this is up key pressed. I'm going to subtract 1. And if is down key pressed, I'm going to add 1 to that variable. And then we're going to return the value of that variable. Let me make sure that I spelled it right here. Okay. And the purpose of this is, so we want to check if the paddle is supposed to go up or down. And if we were to hold both keys, W and S, or up and down at the same time, then we would here get 0 back because we first decrease it and then increase it again. So it's going to be 0. So if we hold both up and down, the pedal is not going to move at all, which is exactly what we want. So last but not least, create an update method that takes the delta time as an argument. And now we can say if this velocity y is greater than 0, we want to call the move down method of the pedal and pass the delta time. And of course, we want to do the same thing here. If the velocity y is less than 0, we want to call move up. If it's exactly 0, none of these two conditions will evaluate to true, and so it won't move at all. All right. So let's go ahead and switch into the constructor of the chord class. And after instantiating the left pedal and the right pedal, let's create an instance of this player pedal controller class. And I'm just going to name the field player controller. It's going to be an instance of player pedal controller. And we need to pass the left pedal to the constructor. And now in the update method of the chord, we can actually add some logic. Which for now will only be calling the update method of player controller. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and save this. What I forgot was to actually call the update method of the chord. So it's never called, so obviously we need to fix that by going into the tennis game class. So we're going to say this chord dot update and pass the delta time. There we go. Save again. And yeah, start. And now I can move. But you're going to realize that once I press either up or down, it does move one time, but after that, I can't move anymore. And that is because we did subscribe to the key down event, but we did not subscribe to the key up event to check if the key was released in order to stop moving. So we set the flags here to true, but we never set them to false again. So it just thinks that, well, the up key is forever pressed. So I'm going to go ahead here and say document. So in the constructor of the player pedal controller, I'm going to add this here at event listener key up. Pass a function here. And basically, we need to do the same thing, but here instead of, setting the values of the fields to true, we're going to set them to false. Save again, run, start game, and now I can actually freely move until I hit a wall. Oh, there's a mistake. We made a mistake down there somewhere. Here it works, the collision works, but it doesn't work down here. I made a mistake there. Sorry about that. So maybe let's go back here into the pedal class and see what I did wrong. Move down. If this position y plus the height... I simply have a typo here. It says height. Which, if it's not defined, it will return undefined. And if we use the plus operator with a float or integer with undefined, It's just not going to change. So, or I'm not sure if it returns undefined or simply it's treated like 0. I think it's treated like a 0, but never mind. Save. Start again. Still something wrong. Let's see, maybe I made a mistake in the bounds property of the chord. That's probably it. Yeah, there it is. Here I forgot the letter Y in chord margin. It's supposed to be chord margin Y. Chord margin is undefined, so yeah, that's why it didn't return the right value. So now it should work. So actually I made 2 mistakes, 2 typos, 2 spelling mistakes. Sorry about that. Save again. Start again. And now it works. Okay. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage, of course, of using jsfiddle here. We don't have proper code completion, auto-completion features to check in syntax. Well, we do have syntax highlighting. We don't have like checks if actually the properties and methods that we use actually exist. But actually that's kind of a general problem with dynamically typed languages, because you can basically create properties and methods on the fly, so they don't actually have to exist at design time, and they might be defined at runtime. So there's no real way for the IDE to check if what you type there makes sense sometimes. But whatever, we fixed it. Okay, so we can now control the left pedal here. We can't go through the walls. That's perfect. All right, so now that we can control our paddle, let's create the scoreboard class next. So let's go somewhere, it doesn't really matter where. Let's say here, right above the rectangle class. Class scoreboard. Whoops. And what I want to do here is create, first of all, a constructor. And the scoreboard should have 3 essential properties: the score of the first player, the score of the second player, and the number of the current round. So we are going to player 1 score, create 3 properties here: player 2 score 0, and round is also 0. So when we initialize, when we create an instance here, the properties all get initialized to the value 0. And actually, we're going to need a way to reset those values. So whenever we restart the match, of course, we want to reset the score and things like that. So I'm going to create a reset method, which does exactly this. And since this is kind of redundant now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call, the reset method here in the constructor. Okay. What else do we need? We need a property that returns the winner of the game. So let's create a property with only a getter, call it winner. And well, how do we define the winner of the game? Well, if one of these score values, if the player 1 score value has reached a certain value, then we declare them the winner, and the same for player 2 score. So if either one of them reaches a certain value, we declare the respective player the winner of the game. And for that, I'm going to go up here in the game settings object, and I'm going to add a new constant here. Let's call it win score. And I'm going to go with 7. So you have to score 7 points in order to win a match. Let's go back down here in the scoreboard class. And now I'm going to implement this getter of the winner property like this. If the player 1 score is greater than or equal to the win score, then I'm going to return player index dot player 1. Otherwise, if the player 2 score is greater than or equal to game settings win score, I'm going to return player index dot player 2. And if none of these two conditions are true, I'm going to return 0. We could also return nothing so that it's undefined, but 0 is fine. So we either return 1, 2, or 0. And now we need a draw method here as well, so we can draw the score to the screen. And it's actually fairly simple to implement. I'm going to add a draw method here that again takes a canvas as an argument. Whoops, sorry. There we go. And again, same old thing. Var or let, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. var declarations get hoisted, but it doesn't matter. We're going to get the 2D drawing context, rendering context, and we need to set a font for us to render the score with. So I'm going to set the font property of the context to, well, a CSS style font family. And again, I don't want to hard code it here, so I'm going to add a property here to our game settings constant. Let's say, well, we're going to have two different fonts, a smaller one and a bigger one. And let me think. Yeah. I'm going to add a property small. What? Small font. And that's going to be of size 60 pixels. And it's the font type Arial. And the large font is going to be 20 pixels in size. And it's also going to be Arial. So these are the two fonts that we're going to use in the game. Let's go back here in the Scoreboard class and now set the font to game settings dot small font. Set the fill style method to some color that we want to render the font with. Well, I guess that should also be a constant. Let's go ahead here and say score, text, color. And let's define a color for that. Let's use the short notation of a hexadecimal representation of a color. So this is going to be a very light gray, almost white. So this is the same as this. All right. So let's go back. Here, Scoreboard draw method, score text color. And now we have to call the fill text method of the context to actually render the text. So on the left-hand side, we want to render the score of the red player. Just concatenate it. And now enter the position, X and Y. I'm just going to hard code it here. That's fine. And then the same for the blue player. But this way, this time I'm going to do the other way around. And for the X position, I'm going to use the canvas width minus, let's go with 115. Again, it's hard-coded, it's not that nice. You could also define these as constants, but let's just keep it simple. We want to get done here. And also in the middle, in the center, we want to render some text that displays the current round. Say canvas width divided by 2. And then since the text itself is going to take up some space, I'm going to subtract about 50 pixels. And the Y position is also going to be 20. Now, if there is a winner, and since JavaScript is dynamically typed, we can simply use the winner property directly here in the if statement, because in JavaScript, all expressions can be evaluated to be falsy or truthy. So if winner is going to be anything other than 0, then this expression is going to be true. So if there is a winner, let's get the name of the winner. So if this winner equals player index player 1, then the winner name is red player. Otherwise, it's blue player. Now, let's set the font now to the large font. And then set the fill style to the score text color again. I guess technically it's redundant, but just to be sure. And then we're going to display here some text like this. And again, it's supposed to be in the center. It's going to be a little bit longer, so I'm going to subtract 75 pixels here. And for Y, let's go with 60 pixels. And I think that's it for the scoreboard. So it renders the red player's score on the left-hand side up here somewhere. And the on the right-hand side, it displays the blue player's score. And and also it renders the current round number. And if there is a winner, then it also displays a message that, yeah, red player has won or blue player has won or whatever. Okay, that seems to be fine. I don't think there's anything left to do in the scoreboard class. All right, so now that we have the scoreboard class, let's actually use it. It's not going to do very much yet because we don't have a way to actually score points yet because there's no ball to play with. But we can still render the score. For that, let's go into the court class here. And we need an instance of, let me adjust this a little bit. There we go. So let's create an instance of scoreboard and store it as a field. Scoreboard equals new scoreboard. And it doesn't take any arguments, so that's fine. And now let's go into the draw method of the court class and right down here, let's say scoreboard.draw and pass the canvas. And that should be it. Save. Run, start game, and there we go. Of course, both players have 0 points because we haven't done anything, but it's working just fine.